Welcome to The Gut Check, Nutrition and Gut Health for Active People, a podcast where we are talking functional nutrition for functional fitness and a functional you. Remember, if your gut is not functioning optimally, you are not functioning optimally. I am your host, registered dietitian and nutritionist, and OCR fan, Kate Klein. You can connect with me on Facebook at The Dublin Dietitian, or go to my website for additional resources, services, and the video recorded versions of these episodes at www.dublindietitian.com. That's DUBLINDIETITIAN. As a standard disclaimer, the information provided here is for educational purposes only. While I strive to provide accurate and helpful information to my listeners and viewers, I cannot take into account individualized circumstances. This is not a substitute for personalized nutrition, health, and medical advice from a health professional. If you are ready to get your personalized plan, you can go to dublindietitian.com and schedule a complimentary strategy session to get a game plan in place for you to hit your health and fitness goals. So let's get to it. Welcome back, Team Gut Check. I'm glad to have you here today as we are going a little bit deeper from last week's episode where we talked about basic running tips with Andy. Well, today we're going into what can go wrong with running, where can pain happen and stem from, talking to a running specialist and physical therapist, Brianne Showman. And this is another topic near and dear to my heart because it was so integral in my own fitness journey. I grew up enjoying running. I played soccer. I was on travel teams. I did track. I would run for fun. I did a 5K when I was in 5th grade because, I'm that person apparently. I was never good at it. I never placed or did any wonderful records. I just enjoyed it. But I started having problems that went beyond, hey, I think there's some knee pain, because that started early on. I was taking Advil before and after soccer games in 5th grade. I had growing pains. I ran around. I did drumline. I was just an active kid. So I was told in college when this knee pain started to get debilitating, and like I'd wake up with that aching and it hurt to go up and down stairs and it hurt to run, that, well, that's just wear and tear. Eventually, when physical therapy didn't work and x-rays showed nothing, they did an MRI, and due to insurance issues, they only did surgery on one knee, even though they both hurt. And so after I recovered from that, I started eventually, with permission, getting back into exercising and running. And it was good at first, but that knee pain started coming back. And I was, getting depressed because I like to be active. I like to run or jog. I like to jog at that time. And it was a therapy for me, and it was being taken away is kind of how I felt at such a young age. I was maybe 20, around there. And I was lucky, I guess, fortunate. I just happened to come across this book called Born to Run by Chris Mcdougall, where he talked about the prevalence of injury in running because of improper shoes and improper footfalls and striking and improper form and all of this. And so I dove into that. I started watching videos. I started learning more. I went to like a running coach and I got help, learned about my form, learned about proper foot strike, got minimalist shoes and Vibrams. I was out on the trails in my little toe shoes, but it made all the difference. I was able to get back to running because of that. And now that then perpetuates, and there's so much more that can be caused beyond just knee pain. And that's what we're going to talk about, all the things that can be important in your form, in your gear, in your training, how it helps your running, your lifting, or just your day-to-day life and mobility. So excited to have you listening. Thank you for joining, and let's get to it. So welcome back, guys. Today I have Brianne here, Brianne Showman, and I'm really excited to get into this one since it just lines up perfectly with a lot of the work we do. But I met Brianne online. We both have a love of like fitness and obstacle course racing, and really with her work, getting to root cause issues behind pain specifically. So she was overcoming an injury at the time that I kind of saw her Facebook posts, and her philosophy of health was just so parallel to mine, and in the way of like functional approaches to health. So getting down to the foundations and the root causes and just fixing the problem rather than masking. So Brianne works as a physical therapist and movement specialist. She's a running technique specialist, and what I think will be really fun to talk about, a barefoot training specialist. So her primary role now is coaching runners and obstacle course racers to help them break out of their injury cycles so they can train and race at their highest level. So welcome, Brianne. Glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'd love to let you share a little bit more about your own background here.
Yeah, so like Kate said, I do have physical therapy background, and I word it that way just because I don't do almost anything for what the traditional physical therapist does when you think about you're going to an outpatient clinic and going to see a physical therapist. Not that I don't do some of that stuff, it's just not the direction I go with most people, just because of stuff I've discovered over the years, essentially.
I get that. I don't work with a traditional dietitian very much.
Right? Just kind of, I think a lot of us do what we do, especially in the aspect that you and I work, Kate, because of our past and the things that we've learned and things we've experienced. During PT school, actually had a bad ankle sprain. And it was one of those, I tried the therapy route, and not that he was doing anything bad. It was just, I was quote unquote functional to the point of I could walk around, do my daily stuff. But the minute I started, once I got back to, at that time I was doing a lot of rock climbing and running and everything, it would flare up again and I'd be set back for another month. And so I'm it's not functional for me. Ended up having surgery for it, which I realized a couple of ligaments were completely shredded. So they were not going to do anything. That joint was not going to do anything it was supposed to do on its own. But through that process, I, naturally went to therapy after the surgery, and it got back fine. But then I still had limited range of motion in the ankle, which I was okay, I was at that time still not a physical therapist. I was still in school. So it's after some surgeries, we just don't get full movement back. This is okay. This is normal. I didn't know any better yet, right?
Yeah, this is normal.
Fast forward years later, I started getting into CrossFit and was finding myself doing squats, especially overhead squats and snatches. And I was compensating because I didn't have motion there. So I was let's start working on it. Let's see what happens. Gradually that started improving. And this was probably 5-6 years after the surgery. Fast forward a couple more years, and I had been wearing so ever since the surgery, naturally didn't go into the surgery because of this issue, but naturally it's oh, you need orthotics because who knows why. But I did realize it got rid of my knee pain that I had since middle school. So I was in orthotics for a while. 2010-ish comes around, and the Vibrams came on, kind of started making an appearance. And my curious physical therapy self was let's see what these do.
I had a pair.
So started running in those, and within at least less than 6 months, I can't remember the exact time frame, but less than 6 months, I had no knee pain, was completely out of my orthotics, every day for everything, no issue. So it really got me diving more into what the foot's actually supposed to do.
From and be you fixed her.
Right.
You propelled her into this career.
Let's do it.
I like it.
But it really got me looking more into what does the foot actually do? What is it supposed to be doing? And how can we really leverage the function of the foot into entire functional patterns of the body?
Nice. So it starts from the ground up on that one.
It starts from the ground up.
Yeah. And like you and I've talked about, a lot of the work I do, my clients are pain issues is one kind of subset of the work. So migraine, joint pain, muscle pains. And I teach, just kind of for the listeners, I teach this 4-pronged or this wheel of health where we talk about nutrition and GI, stress, sleep, and then what I call physicality, or all the physical aspects. So that's posture, alignment, movement, and exercise, proper form, proper gear, such as shoes. And typically I just have people that's not my focus. I kind of hit the other things. And that's why I'm really excited to have Brianne here to dive into a little bit more of these physical aspects, because it is so critical and pervasive. So let's kick it off with that foundation, the feet. So you are a big advocate for barefoot training. Apparently that kind of came as well from your minimalism shoes with the Vibrams. So why is that so important to focus on? And what do you feel like people need to know about that?
You know, I love using the term or the phrase of foot as the foundation. And I know a lot of like barefoot people have kind of picked up on that as well. But it's so true. Like when you think about like the foundation of a building, the bottom of a building, the thing it sits on, if that's not weak, over time, that building is going to develop cracks, potentially collapse. Like that's what happens with a weak foundation. The body's the same way. If your foundation, you're stand on your feet all day. If those are weak, eventually your body's going to develop cracks. Only our cracks are injuries. They aren't going to cause our body to fall to the ground. Maybe, hopefully not. But eventually those cracks are going to show up in the form of injuries. And it's really not a matter of like, is this going to happen? It's a matter of what and where.
Yeah. I remember when I first was learning about this mysterious thing called the kinetic chain in the body, the example they gave about how, it's this ripple effect up the body from the feet up is you could have a sprained ankle and down the road that could manifest as a bad shoulder or as headaches. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So that was kind of my introduction to that physical web on the body. So do you advocate people go around barefoot as much as they can, or are there certain things they can do? Like I've seen some of your videos, you lift barefoot, but are there times where shoes are better? What should people look for with shoes, and when to do barefoot, when to do shoes, and what to look for in shoes?
Yeah, it's definitely a process. I will never suggest someone who's like in orthotics or very supportive shoes just to go straight to like, let's be barefoot all the time and start training barefoot. Like we're going to cause other issues, but start at home. Maybe if you're used to being in shoes all day, start maybe an hour a day out of your shoes when you get home, or just taking your shoes off like once you get home for the rest of the evening, and just start like weaning out of them essentially. At the gym, things like that. Sometimes we are stuck with gym rules at times. Some gyms do require shoes. I've had people tell me like they got yelled at for not wearing shoes. So
mine has a sign in it now. I was so bummed. I would do socks. I would do a lot of sock work because I used to have a foot that rolled in.
Okay.
So that let me have a better view of what was going on.
So respect your gym rules, but if you can be barefoot, like I say, train as much as you can barefoot, knowing that like you don't want to destroy the skin on your feet. So like for me, like box jumps, rope climbs, things like that, double unders, anything that could potentially like destroy the skin on my feet, like then I will put my shoes on. But anytime if I'm just like lifting, I usually will keep my shoes off just because I'm like, there's no reason for them to be on. And people always tell me like, aren't you worried about, or ask me, aren't you worried about dropping something on your foot? I'm like, does it happen when you're wearing shoes? Like, why is this the question right now?
How much, have you ever done it before? How much does that shoe really help if you drop it?
And then there's that factor too. Like, don't think really helping matters even if it is covered.
That's, you think more of just a mental block, like a fear of hurting the foot.
I think it is. With that said, like if someone's just getting started and like wants to maybe start exploring barefoot, deadlifts and back squats are going to be your best ones to start with. They are very like safe lifts in the form of like not much can happen to the feet. The feet are solid. The feet are on the ground. And so normally I'll tell people like if you don't want to do anything else without shoes on, like at least start there.
Mm-hmm. Is there any risk like sweaty feet? Do you see anything? Are there any suggestions for people who are getting a little moist?
It probably depends on the surface. Like if you're on, so yeah, on that note, if you're on more of like a lifting platform, that's a little bit slicker, either barefoot or shoes. Like you don't want to wear socks on that because you don't want to slide. If it's more of like the rubber mats that is in a lot of gyms, I I've never had an issue with like it being wet, anything like that. Even if like I'm in Arizona, we don't have puddles of sweat on the floor too much, except in the middle of the summer when it is somewhat humid here. But I've never had any issues myself as far as like slipping on the floor when it's the black rubber mats.
Okay. So start with just taking your shoes off a little bit more at home and kind of in the day to day. And then if you progress to the point you're comfortable doing it at the gym, follow the gym rules, be mindful of surfaces, and just start with very structured movements. Sounds good.
Yep.
I'm curious too. I've seen maybe in the past 3 or 4 months, this trend on Instagram and Facebook where people are using like these toe spacers when they lift.
Yeah.
Is there a benefit to that? Is that useful, or is it just kind of like a fatty little thing?
Yeah, no, it's not a fad. I personally don't wear them when I lift. I do wear them in the evenings when I'm just kind of chilling at home. I do know people who wear them like all day in their shoes, that sort of thing. So there's a couple things. One, when we're in shoes all the time, it basically squeezes our toes together, most shoes. Think about this, like technically they probably wouldn't go as wide, but technically we should be able to spread our toes like we do our fingers because we can strain them in something all day. That doesn't happen. Like think what your hands would be like if you from toddler age wore mittens on your hands. Like you wouldn't have as much function over them. Your feet are basically the same thing. So can we get the toes to work as good as the fingers can? Maybe, maybe not, but we can at least start opening up that space in there and giving them some room. Because in between all those long bones of the toes are blood vessels and nerves. So the more space we give that, the better the circulation is, the better the healing is in there, fewer injuries we get because the circulation is better, everything can heal better, recover better. Plus a lot of times when we hear people say like, I have a neuroma, Martin's neuroma, things like that, a lot of times it's just because those muscles are tight in there. They're pinching on the nerves. It's not a true neuroma. That's just pinching on the nerves, that when we can open up that space in there, it just kind of, it stretches everything out and things calm down.
So barefoot, stretch the toes. If a person's running, do you do like barefoot running, or are there shoes that you recommend or things to look for in a running shoe to help with that?
Yeah, depending on the surface. I mean, you always want to protect your feet against the environment. So it does depend on surface. If I'm on grass or grassy area that I know is like, there's not going to be broken glass on it, there's not going to be anything that I could necessarily cut my feet on, or concrete that's not 120 degrees in Arizona heat, then I will run barefoot. But it's like if I'm on the trails, because our trails have everything possible spiny and thorny under the sun, and they're very rocky and rough, or like hot asphalt, things like that, places I just don't know if it's safe or not, I will wear shoes. With that said, me personally, I wear Minimalist shoes. I prefer the Zero Shoes brand. That's more just a me thing. I like the styles there better than I do on Vivo Barefoot, but I know people who love Vivo Barefoot shoes too. So both very similar. I just have like style preference to Zero. But yeah, and once again, like I wouldn't say like, if you're used to running 5 miles a day, don't just like switch to Zero Shoes or switch to a Minimalist shoe or go barefoot running for 5 miles. Like you're going to regret it and hate yourself for it. So there is a way to like get into it properly, strengthen the feet properly in order to like get yourself there. But it's definitely possible to do it if that's something that you want to try out.
Okay. So look for like a minimalist shoe, basically, is what the phrase would.
Yeah.
And then can people do good stretches to help their feet, just like basic exercise at home or little things like that?
The things I always start people with, because most people, like I said, like we should have good control over our toes, just like we do our fingers. Most people just don't though. So I will start everybody on 2 basic exercises. One is called short foot, which is basically finding what we call tripod of the foot, which is the heel just behind the big toe and just behind the small toe, getting equal weight distribution between those, and then just gently pushing your foot down, just gently pushing your toes down into the floor. And I'm not talking about curling your toes down to the floor. It's like keeping them straight and just like gently pushing them. So we shouldn't notice a whole lot of anything going on in the foot. You're just subtly contracting that. But that really starts getting the foot activated. And it's also, what was that?
That I'm going to sit here at my desk and like toe press.
You should. And then once you learn how to do that, it's super helpful. So like anytime when I'm lifting in the gym, like deadlifts, any squats, anything like that, I'm thinking about like, what was my foot doing at the time? And really like basically creating that short foot because it generates more power naturally up through your legs. So something super good to learn. And then the other thing I start everybody with is essentially learning how to use your toes. So keeping that tripod position, try to keep your small toes down and lift just your big toe up off the floor.
Some intense coordination abilities.
Lots of coordination, lots of frustration because it's hard to do for a lot of people right away. And then just opposite of that, bringing all your toes up, keeping that tripod of the foot and just taking that big toe down. So really learning how to coordinate the big toe is super important to just our overall foot function. And also learning how to use that big toe actually helps with our glute function as well. So there's a lot of carryover to that weak glute conversation into like what are our toes actually doing.
That would be a very fun topic to get into another time, maybe.
You definitely can.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to talk about that. So that's a lot of how to kind of take care of the feet and some things, and I think that's a good place for people to start. But let's get into a little bit of the whys. So obviously in your work, what you do, you see a lot of pain in runners and injury. Are there common causes behind that besides just not being barefoot enough and not having the right shoe? Are there other things that occur that people should be aware of?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as a very general, I'm still going to say the feet. But, a couple things go on, and it's really fun diving into conversations because most of the things that are happening with the body are compensations from something years ago. So like one client I have right now, she's always on the outside of her feet. Well, she was a ballet dancer, and that's how they learned to position themselves, especially in point, is rolling to the outside of their feet. Like they're always in point, they're pointing. So like things like that, things that we did as a child into our teenage years, things like that, create these habits that our bodies are stuck in that we don't realize could be a detriment to us in the future. Also like past injuries. So like I was telling you about my ankle injury, which was back in 2003. It wasn't until years later that I started noticing, you know what, going back to your shoulder, I started having some shoulder issues on the opposite side, realized even though my ankle is better now, it was just still those things that had set in from when my ankle was limited. So a lot of times I'm diving into like past injuries, things that happened, just habits that you've created over the years to really figure out what is the body doing now that is like creating these patterns so these injuries are being caused now.
Yeah. So if you've just been taking Advil for ages, like it's not getting better, get back.
There might be a reason.
Yeah, and I know I see a lot of people, it seems very common to see that duck-footed kind of thing. So is that related to the feet, or is that more the glutes and other muscles kind of causing that? And then they'll be like, oh, it's just how it is. Like that's how my dad.
It could be either. And you definitely have to work with someone assess on yourself what's normal, what's not. It can be tough because some people hip anatomy, like that's just where it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I have a client I've been working with for a bit now, and she was like, she's like, my feet point out. I was the therapist in the past. Like, it's always like, make sure your feet are pointing normal. But talking with her, it's like every time she does that, she feels a sharp pinch in her hip. Like, and when I talk to her and like assess her hips, like naturally her neutral position is slightly rotated out. So she could do whatever she wants. It's never going to be comfortable for her to walk with her feet straight. Now,
Structure.
it's a bone structure. And I've had a number of clients with that. Like, there's actually a guy at my gym that some of the coaches will kind of look at, and I'm like, don't mess with it. Like, his hips, like, that's where his hips are. They are not like, leave it. He's so some people, like, that's just where their hips are. It's the hip anatomy, bony anatomy. It's not going to change. But a lot of people, it is due to weak glutes. It's due to habits. It's just due to like lifestyle where they've been. Once you can get them to fire the feet better, fire the hips better, strengthen everything, a lot of that can straighten out.
Nice. So I think a lot of people who are active runners, they would probably most commonly think of pain induced by the running being like knee pain. But do you see other problems from their running form or issues where it could lead to back pain or headaches or other things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're talking back and headaches, like, lower extremity stuff, I'm always going to look at running, like what the leg is doing in general, how the foot's landing, all that stuff. Because that can contribute to so many issues. But the thing that often, or that a lot of times we aren't looking at that plays a huge role is where the torso is when we're running. So like, ultimately, we don't want to be like stiff as a board straight up and down, but we don't want to be like bent forward either. Because when you the more you bend forward, what do you have to do to straighten up? You basically have to really extend your back and
arch it all up.
And arch your back, look up with your head. You're putting a lot of stress and strain on those areas. And a lot of times, like when I ask people, like, is this coming on later? Like, the more fatigue someone gets, the more they lean forward. So that's a big thing I'm looking at when we're talking about like back and neck pain. The other common thing when we're talking neck pain with runners is the runners who hold their shoulders really tight, their arms really tight. So they're rotating their trunk, but they're not actually getting an arm swing. So the more you're rotating your trunk, the tighter you hold everything in your shoulders, the more tension is going to be transferred up into the neck.
Gotcha. So a lot of things all coming down to form, foot health, and proper muscle balance, I assume, like engagement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you work with a lot of people who do overtraining? Is that a pretty common cause?
It is. A lot of people just don't. Well, overtraining can come from a number of things. Like you said,
let's redefine that. Yes. Overtraining to me means not so much like, because people would tell me if I did like 2 or 3 hours a day, they're like, oh, you're overtraining. I'm like, I feel great. So to me, it's when there's an imbalance of the amount and intensity of your work without enough recovery, time, rest, movement, fuel.
Yes.
But I guess make sure we're on the same page. Is that how you feel too?
So and that's what I was going to say, like kind of what you addressed earlier when we're talking like sleep and stress and nutrition, like all of that plays into it, because someone can train an hour a day and getting into an overtraining situation if they're not doing all the things to get proper recovery. Whereas someone can train 3 to 4 hours a day and not have those issues. Like, how are your professional everything players able to train for how many hours a day that they train? I don't even know. And you never hear them like, oh, I need to take a week off from practice and I can't play this week because I'm overtrained. Like, that doesn't happen because they have the people in place to make sure they're doing all the other things right.
Stretching, whatever if they need to do ice baths or massage, their nutrition is very regimented. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So okay. So someone who's let's just say out of balance, but we'll call it like, I don't want to say it's the average person, but I know of plenty of people who go to the gym, work out a lot, they're training, they're like, with their diet, their stress is high. Most people don't sleep. So how can someone tell if they're kind of at risk for that overtraining, and what's the risk of overtraining?
Yeah. I think I just had this conversation yesterday with a client who was kind of stuck there, and we realized like what she's like work and everything else and what's impacting and creating it. So we're backing things down a little bit, but it's kind of like, everyone goes through those times of just like, maybe they're not the most motivated to get to the gym that day because whatever else is going on in life or whatever. But when you like are going a full, like when going to the gym, training is your routine and like it's your thing you do every single day, you love it. And then all of a sudden you're having this period of time where it's like, I don't want to go. Like, I'm just so not motivated. I'm going through the motions every time I'm here just because I feel like I'm supposed to be here because this is what I do. Like when you start getting in those situations, it's time to assess, like, is this my body telling me like, I need a break right now, that I'm doing too much? So those are big, I feel like that's a big factor into, or a big sign. Otherwise, like just when start like nagging little injuries start popping up. Usually that's not always, but a lot of times, like if things have been going great, everything's awesome, and then some like weird things start happening. It's usually a good sign that overtraining is going on too.
Not recovered by your next workout kind of thing, or like
just
eating more.
And then now, like with all the different wearables, a lot of times it's telling you, like, you know, the Whoop will tell you like what's, you know, where your recovery is at. I know some of the Garmin's will tell you like your workout's unproductive, things like that. Like those can be signs too. Like if you just had a workout that you feel like you were killing it and you get done and it's like, oh, your workout was unproductive today. Like maybe you weren't working as hard as you thought, and maybe your body's not liking this. And so with all the wearables now, I think it's a lot easier to tell. It's just, are we paying attention to that then?
Okay. Yeah. A lot of things that can clue in for us. I guess I kind of wanted to tap back to, again, the look at the root cause, fix the problem, don't just mask it. Because I know a lot of health professionals in a variety of fields, they use a lot of like orthotics and inserts and cushionings and braces to help people get past pain, as well as sometimes medication. And I know for us, again, we share an alignment where it's like, yeah, okay, use that in the short term while you need it, but kind of what's the long-term implication of orthotic use?
Yeah, so orthotics specifically, so kind of to get a little biomechanical with you.
Bring on science. Love
awesome.
it.
So like a lot of times you talk to a foot doctor, you talk to the running stores, and it's like, oh, well, you're pronating, we need to stop that. Our body needs to pronate. Like our foot needs to pronate. That is what gives us our shock absorption. So think about like, if your vehicle, your shocks went out, like think what that feels like. We've all been in some sort of vehicle that like had no more shocks. It's really jarring, right? If you don't pronate, you don't have that shock absorption, that jarring basically goes up through your body. So your body takes a lot of forces. So short term, to get past whatever pain you're dealing with, orthotics can be helpful. Long term, we're increasing the forces through the body, for one. Two, when we pronate, it allows our knee to get into the position that it needs to get to in that toe off. It allows our hip to get into the position. It allows our pelvis to rotate. If we don't have that pronation, we don't get that toe off like we need to, everything up the chain doesn't actually get in the position it needs to. So long term, it's not a matter of like, are we going to get injured? It's kind of like, we're going to get injured at something's going to flare up at some point. Is it going to be the ankle or the hip or the knee or the back or, you know, where?
So essentially, yeah, it's not fixing a problem. It's actually, in a way, do you ever feel like it's exacerbating a problem because it's just?
It actually can. A client of mine, actually, she was put in orthotics for a foot issue on her right side. She had, long story short, an injury from, not even an injury, she actually got a bacterial infection, got into her knee, had to have surgery on her knee to clean all that out. But the orthotics actually started flaring her knee up. Wow. Because it was changing the mechanics around that knee. The scar tissue was in there already. So we took the orthotics out and like the knee cleared up, and actually she doesn't need them for her foot anymore. Anyway, but yeah, so it can actually, especially if there's already issues somewhere, it can definitely exacerbate problems.
So again, comes back, find that root cause. What's the why? Don't just brace it. Don't just medicate it.
Exactly.
Now, a side note on that one that I want to ask about, because I remember a while back, you essentially said the same thing about foam rolling, where I think you tagged it something like you shouldn't foam roll, meaning in the sense like this should not be your ongoing thing. So what's your view on foam rolling, I guess? What is it that you're looking at with that? When do you use it, and when do you realize like, hey, something else is going on?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, if you have to do, regardless if it's foam rolling or something else, if you have to do something every single day, just be able to like go for a run, you're probably just masking a problem. But when it comes to foam rolling, so first and foremost, a lot of times people are like, they use them to try to loosen up tight muscles, get knots out, that sort of thing. The foam roller cannot get deep enough to do any of that. So you're not like, you can foam roll pretty much any area of your body. You're not actually going to loosen anything up. What you are doing is you are stimulating the nervous system to basically help that area like temporarily relax. So that's why you like, when you do it, it feels great. You feel looser because you stimulate that nervous system to actually relax for a little bit. You haven't actually done anything to loosen anything up.
Okay. So can or should it be a part of a process before a workout? Like if you are tight, or do you recommend stretching at all to help with that? Or what, again, I guess if someone's foam rolling and they're hearing this and going like, oh my gosh, okay, I've been doing it, what do you suggest they do instead, or how should they incorporate that, if at all?
Yeah. I think it can be, it can be used in conjunction to like figuring out that cause. So like if I have someone who it's like, you know what, like this is tight every single time, like I go run, foam rolling helps. Cool. Use that before you go run. So you can still run without issues, but then let's do X, Y, and Z things. So long-term, you don't have to be doing that every time before you go.
So much like an orthotic or brace, it's just meant to be kind of a temporary help of the symptoms, but it's not addressing the actual issue.
Correct.
Okay. So do you foam roll at all, or?
I don't.
Not.
I do not.
Do you stretch? Is that any different, or is that a similar kind of thing?
Occasionally I will. I think stretching has a time and place. I feel like it's somewhat overrated though. Mainly because it's like you hear someone who stretches every single day and they get injured. You hear someone who doesn't stretch at all and they have the same injuries. Like being flexible isn't necessarily solving the problem. Being tight isn't solving the problem either, but like stretching every day isn't necessarily solving the problem. And the reason's twofold. One, if something's chronically tight, once again, there's a reason for that. Like your body doesn't just tighten up muscles because it wants to be tight. Like there's a reason for it.
We're getting into some autoimmune fibromyalgia. My wheelhouse.
Then see Kate.
Yes. Healthy situation. They should not.
Exactly. Two, a lot of times muscles are tight because like joints are stiff, or we haven't actually taught the joint how to use the motion. So using the calf as an example, you stretch your calf, it loosens up, your ankle gains motion, but then your ankle doesn't know how to use that motion that you just gained, so it tightens back up again. So stretching isn't bad as long as you're also, stretching for chronic tightness isn't bad as long as you are then following it up with, well, now we loosened it up, let's use that motion so the body actually knows how to control it, so we aren't constantly tightening up again.
Okay. So is there benefit then to stretching before or after a workout to kind of help loosen that up for your range of motion? And then would that workout then assist that? So in that example, like if you stretch your calves and loosen up your ankles before doing like a bunch of squats.
Yeah. Typically, I always suggest before a workout to do more dynamic stretching. So rather than like just doing a calf hold, like doing it more of like like eccentric heel raises. So just kind of letting that drop down and then coming back up. So you're elongating things in a functional motion. Or just doing more, just more dynamic movements before working out. After working out, that's when I would normally suggest someone stretches, especially if they've done something to really like tax an area. So sticking with the legs, like if you've just done a crazy like hill workout, by all means, stretch your calves, stretch your quads, stretch your hamstrings. Like you just torched everything.
You did tighten up muscles.
Like for me, like if I do a workout that has like a ton of like pressing in it and my triceps feel like they're blown up, like I'll stretch my triceps, you know? So I feel like stretching should be very like workout dependent. If you've completely fatigued something, blown something up, by all means, stretch it out to kind of keep it loose. But it shouldn't be something that we depend on every single day.
Gotcha. So we should be able to function without having to stretch first.
Correct. Correct.
Ideally. And so, but doing some of this can help with preventing injury if your range of motion is good and you're assisting and kind of supporting that joint health with proper movements. So what do you see with your clients, the difference between preventing injury versus those who are coming to you and recovery? Like what type of programming is different? How much longer is that journey?
Yeah. So typically when people are coming to me, it's because they've been injured for a while. They've done all the like hands-on stuff possible, the needling, the scraping, the cupping, you name it, they've done it. Typically what's been missed is the teaching the body actually how to move right. So what I'm always from the beginning with someone is like, let's see what your body's doing. Let's discuss what it's doing and why it should be doing that, and then what we need to do to correct it. And really starting like basically building that base of like teaching the foot how to be a foot. If it's a shoulder issue, really looking at like, how is someone controlling that shoulder blade, or even can they control that shoulder blade? And really starting from that base point. Because once you do that, you naturally create better movement with the body, which creates more power and more strength.
Build from there. And how do you have trouble where people don't want to do like their rehab moves? Because I know that's something I always say, and I always hear like, rehab sucks. I hate these little stupid banded exercises, you know, and you made a post once about like, they're the non-sexy moves that you're not seeing on Instagram, but they're key to joint stability. So kind of what were your experiences having to do those, what a lot of people think are like boring and mind numbing moves over and over and over? Asking for a friend.
No, you're absolutely right. They are boring. They're boring. They're essentially what can be felt like time consuming. But I think the big thing is like, if most like, by the time someone talks to me, it's like they've tried everything else. And so it's kind of like not an immediate buy-in, but one of those things is like, well, like nothing else has worked. Nothing else my way has worked. Like there might be some sense to this. And usually once like, and I'm really good about questioning people as far as like, not like, let's do this motion right. What do you feel? What do you notice? And once people are like, I've never felt that muscle turn on in my life. Like it's pretty eye-opening to them to realize like, oh, like my body hasn't been moving right lately. I've never felt this muscle before. And so it's pretty like when I really question people and make them feel like talk about what they're noticing in their body, it's pretty easy to like help them realize like maybe this is important for me to be doing. But it is boring.
So you just kind of tell them like, suck it up and do it.
Pretty much.
Sort of half watch a movie while you're also mindful of your movement, but yeah. I would love to hear too, if you have any stories, since again, a lot of the audience here, we're dealing with IBS, migraines, you know, fatigue. So have you had any clients with any of those issues where fixing this kind of physical aspect has helped yield some benefits to GI issues, migraines, stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. GI, nothing comes to mind, but migraines definitely. Because not all migraines, but and most migraines have a number of triggers, but a lot of times with migraines, one of the triggers is tension. Coming back to thinking about how the shoulders are working. If we aren't using the shoulders like they're meant to be used mechanically, and we aren't using them effectively, we tighten up the upper traps, which tightens up the neck, which creates tension in the neck, which can create migraines. So a lot of times, if we can, just talking about the migraine side of things, if we're teaching the shoulders how to work better, we aren't causing that tension in the neck. That often can be a trigger for migraines.
Okay. So again, and that can start with the feet, but also just mindfulness and awareness of posture, right?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I really work with really everyone. I do kind of work from that bottom up from the foot, just because I know how important that whole kinetic, like you said already, the kinetic chain, how important that is. So we'll definitely work with the feet, but then also, like, depending on what's going on with the body, like figure out what else is causing that tension in there.
Yeah. Well, so let's see if we can you summarize all that? What would be like your key takeaways for anybody listening? We've hit a lot in here, because I know you work like nutrition, it form and running impacts so many aspects, and there's so many nuances and personalizations. But if you could sort of summarize to somebody, what would you want them to take away?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for anyone is just learning or teaching your foot how to be a foot again, or at least letting it start to be a foot again. Starting with doing the short foot exercise and the toe strengthening, toe dexterity that I talked about earlier, and just starting to teach the foot how to work like a foot. Because the more you can do that, the better off everything in the body will respond.
Nice. So focus on the feet. And if they were looking for a practitioner, and I know you do a lot of virtual, and I'll have your contact information too, but are there specific trainings or certifications people should look for with a physical therapist, or like a running, medical running form? Is there something people could look for to know that they were getting someone specifically trained in this type of thing?
Yeah. Every website and every company's going to show the things a little bit differently, but if I would absolutely work with someone, if you're a runner and you have a running injury, you want to work with someone who works with runners, and potentially runs themselves, but if nothing else, they work with runners, so they understand what running technique is supposed to look like. They understand how we actually strengthen someone for proper running and all of that. And then as far as when it comes to any foot and ankle issue, foot and ankle practitioners are hard to find. There is a barefoot training certification. I do have mine.
Very cool.
It's getting more known, but it's still not out there a ton. So finding good foot and ankle people can be difficult. Sometimes you just kind of have to test it out, or kind of ask questions, drill them, kind of see if it's going to be the standard of just like, you're going to balance on one leg, you're going to do heel scrunches, you're going to pick up marbles and all that stuff. If it's very generic, then they probably don't know a lot about the foot.
You're getting a textbook routine, not a personalized routine.
Yes,
possibly. So feel it out, trust your gut. I guess I would like to ask you, you're very busy. You've got a lot going on. You've got your own podcast, you've got your own business, you work out, you've been in some fitness competitions. So Brianne, what is your favorite healthy recipe?
Ooh, that's a great question.
For you, who I know you have shared, you're a bland food person.
I'm not a bland food. I just prefer simplicity.
Yes.
I use lots of spices to make things taste good.
There you go. You have a favorite, or like a go-to breakfast or post-workout?
Yeah, so I have my during the week breakfast, because I can drink smoothies and work really easily at the same time. And then I have my weekend breakfast because I have more time.
Yes. Okay.
But my smoothie is, I sometimes do a little bit of kale in it because of iodine issues. I don't do too much raw kale in a week. So usually like 2 out of the 5 will have some kale in it. But otherwise it's avocado, blueberry, coconut, from a can coconut milk,
Actual
coconut water. Yeah, thicker,
real.
and not full of chemicals.
Perfect.
Let's see, coconut water goes in there, and then I put in a turmeric powder, let's see, magnesium, L-glutamine, maca root, and some protein powder.
Very nice. That's your nice go-to weekday breakfast.
It's my weekday smoothie, yes.
And what are 3 books, podcasts, or resources you would recommend to the audience?
Well, my podcast, of course.
Of course.
Um,
About that now.
My podcast is called Highly Functional. It's awesome. I get lots of fun people on there. Kate has been on there.
Yes.
Let's see. Other podcasts I love, especially if you're in the OCR world, I think Rich Ryan does a great job with the Reinforced Running podcast. I've gotten a lot of his guests on my podcast, but he has some great interviews and conversations on his. Let's see, as far as books go, my all-time favorite book, it has nothing to do with fitness, nothing to do with running, but it's a great one for life, and I reread it once a year, is called The 4 Agreements.
Okay. Do you know who that's by offhand?
It is Don McGill Ruiz.
All right. We'll link some things in the show notes. So very cool. So 2 good podcasts and a good book to check out. So, and yeah, Brianne, is there anything that you would like to share? The red carpet is yours here. Anything you want to promote, any events coming up, any service, any things you've got going on, or things that you just want to highlight and give a shout out to right now?
Awesome. So a couple of things. If you just kind of like have some issues, you've worked with a ton of people, you aren't really sure like if what you want to explore, I will offer any of the listeners to do a free running analysis. You just have to email me to do that. We can get that, figure out scheduling that, but it's Brianne@getyourfixedpt.com. And then if you just kind of want more information about who I am, what I do, especially when it comes to foot and ankle, the easiest way to do that is go to runwithhappyfeet.com, and you can put your information in there and watch kind of basically it's just a little bit of a master class as far as like why the foot and ankle is important. It dives into more information than what we talked about here, and then like what can be done about it.
Perfect. And what other contact information do you have that we'll also put in the show notes for people if they want to reach out?
Yeah, Facebook's usually the easiest. I'm on Instagram. I'm not on there as much though, but Instagram is the.ocr.doc. If you are on Instagram, prefer that method. Otherwise, Facebook. I have a group called, I'm spacing right now. I'm totally spacing right now.
I'm looking at your notes. Is the OCR Athlete Health and Performance? Is that?
Yes, I changed the name recently though, which is why I'm blanking. It's trail running for obstacle course racers. That's what it is.
Oh, I see running training for obstacle course racers. Is that it?
Yes, that one.
We'll link it, guys. Check out the I know I recently changed mine too. I can't remember the nuances.
This is what happens when we change things, right? So yeah, Facebook, you can find me, Instagram. Otherwise, you can feel free to email me.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming onto the show today, Brianne, and really cool to learn about this. I love, again, just not only your own personal perseverance and everything that you've kind of come through, but just your science-based research into all of this, and the same idea of just fix the problem, find out what the root cause is and address that. Stop just masking things. So I love that. The barefoot running is really cool. I would love to talk to you more about that, and the toe to glute thing. That sounds fascinating.
Let's do it.
Let's do that sometime. But for now, I'll go ahead and wrap up. So thank you guys for listening. And thank you, Brianne, for being on the show.
You're welcome. This is fun.
Yeah. Till next time, guys. Take care. Thank you for listening again, guys. I hope you got something out of that. I hope there were some good, valuable takeaways. As always, it really means a lot to me, and I appreciate the support. If you can like, subscribe, share this content, and let me know what questions you have and what sort of topics you would like covered. Take care. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time.